Hi everyone and welcome to the High Frequency Podcast. Today we have a DJ, producer and good friend of mine, Matt Empyre. Matt is someone with a genuine passion for electronic music and being the most creative DJ possible when playing live. He's played for the likes of Elro in Europe and Shipwreck Festival in New Zealand, and even played alongside artists such as Carl Cox and Fatboy Slim. Matt contributed so much value to the New Zealand electronic music scene between 2008 and 2014, where he ran parties right across Wellington and Auckland under several different brands. He's genuinely one of the most friendly and non-judgmental people I've ever met, which is exactly what I think club culture is all about. Please welcome to the podcast, Matt Empyre. So Matt, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's for those who are listening, me and Matt go back quite a way actually. I really wanted to get him on the podcast as like the first guest that I ever had on. But Matt now lives in a different country, so the time difference has been not ideal. But so Matt, obviously, I really wanted to get you on, partially just because when I first came to New Zealand, me and Matt, we used to DJ at the same club together in Wellington. We used to play at a club called Mayo, which now doesn't exist. And
No.
they were fun times, man. Like we used to play until when the national default of alcohol license was 6 a.m. in New Zealand before it got shut down to 4 a.m.
Those days.
Yeah, we used to play on Saturday nights, and those were fun times. Like we had pretty much free reign on what we could play in the club, so we had some fun. And but Matt, obviously, you know, I've got you on because things have transpired quite a lot since then in your DJ and music career. So I'd really like to hear all about it. So tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey in the world of electronic music so far.
Sure. So I'm Matt Empyre, and as you mentioned, we met. I think it was around 2009,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, 2010, something like that. I think the club closed in around 2010, 2011. So yeah, it was around 2009. But I've always been interested in music ever since I was a young kid. Although like I didn't have the greatest music growing up because my parents just had like Boyzone and Elvis CDs and things. But I remember like hearing Sandstorm, which is like that like typical trance like track that was huge in 2000 by Darude on TV, and just being fascinated by what is this music, like. And I went through like a phase where I was drumming like for maybe 10, 15 years or something like that. It was starting when I was around 5. But so I was in like bands and things, but I was always into like dance music on the side, and like at parties and things I'd play like the Sensation Mega Mix and from 2005, and that seeing that was kind of what on YouTube. I think it wasn't YouTube; it was like some video site back in the day before YouTube. Seen this like Sensation Mega Mix from 2005, based at the Amsterdam Arena, and that was the moment I was like, I need to figure out how to do this, and started to like play around with iTunes and just like trying to get songs in time without any like real way of knowing how to actually do it. And eventually came across this YouTube channel called Skins, which I think still exists. Some
Yeah.
crazy world guy that wears hats and things, and and been through quite a life himself. But he was like teaching how to DJ, so I was like really really into this channel, and didn't have the money to buy any of my own equipment, but kind of got involved with some guy at school that was running like these parties during the school holidays at this kind of a semi-abandoned nightclub. Like it was mostly used for like gaming machines and things. And we did one party together with him, or I did one party with him, and then decided to try and do my own. So I did like 3 or 4 different school holidays of that, and made a decent amount of money, and started buying DJ gear. And it was crazy, like having never actually really touched it before, because I'd watched so much of this YouTube guy. I kind of knew how everything worked, and that's kind of how I've always been ever since with DJ gear. I'm just fascinated by like everything that's out there, and I just want to know how it works, and like nothing really scares me. So yeah, I started playing in like a local bar when I turned 18, then moved to Wellington. Was frequently going to Mayor even before I started working there, just hounding the DJs, like watching them. There's a guy called Everett or DJ Rhett at the time. It was amazing with scratching over house music and stuff. It's something I'd never really heard before, and got to know him and Russell, who was he was only a DJ I think at that time, but he eventually became the manager, and they they kind of gave me a slot on, I think it was Thursdays to start with, and then were pretty impressed with what I was doing there and started moving into doing Fridays and Saturdays. And I think you came along, and it was around 2009, right?
Yeah, it was 2009 because I think I came back to New Zealand on a 2-year working holiday visa in November 2019. So yeah, it would have been then.
Right. Yeah. So yeah,
Sorry,
2009,
2009.
pretty big year for the
I said
club.
2019.
Yeah, yeah,
I haven't woken up this
pretty
morning, clearly.
yeah, pretty big year for the club. I remember like the first introduction from you was, I think there's a guy called Bonner who worked there,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
he's like, oh, he's this like English guy. He seems like really good, and he gave me like a mix CD or something. I can't remember what it was, and I was like, oh, just give him a chance, like because I heard so many times like, oh, this DJ wants to play or whatever, and like listen to their music, and it was like, yeah, it's not really like a good fit for the club, but I could hear like that they were like a decent DJ, but it's a bit of a shame. But with you, I was like, oh, screw it, I'll just give them a go, and it was worth it. Like we had some amazing times there. I think the first time I ever played shirtless, which was the first and last time, was like the Sevens one year. I think it was. It was so freaking hot in that place, like
Yeah.
because the fans were just not keeping up, and yeah, just the if you try and picture what the club looked like, it was like some fever, like drug trip, basically. Like you walk in, and there's actually a video on my Facebook page if you go to Matt Empyre on Facebook with a Empyre. I think you could probably link it as well in the
Yeah,
description. But
sure.
there's like a video I made for like a school project or a university project, and it's just like the guy who created the place like redesigned it 3 times. He had like a big drug problem and stuff, and it showed like when you walked in, it's just LED everywhere. This was like before LED was even a thing, really. Like the amount of money they spent on the dance floor and stuff was just outrageous, like $250,000 or something ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had this perspex on the floor, and like the perspex would like fail every 2 or 3 weeks. There'd be like somebody would step through it, and then they'd have to put a bit of wooden board over this like $200,000 floor, and just nuts. But like from there, I moved over to Terrace. Once that place closed down around 2010 or 11, I think it was. And yeah, like was met up with some new friends that I kind of met in the DJ space. A guy called Harpe and Mr. Oz, who was like a Vespa resident, which was like a club. Basically, when our club closed, there was the next club like on the other street over the other side called Vespa, and that would open till 7 somehow. And I think there wasn't really any like laws about how late you could open. It seemed like anybody could open as long as they wanted, but it's just nobody would go like at 8 in the morning. But Vespa sort of held the crowd there, and so I met like Harpe through him, and then yeah, we started playing at like this garden club Terrace, which was a smoking bar that you were only meant to smoke within like the first meter of the window. But like within the first two weeks, like that line on the floor had basically been scuffed away, and so the entire place was just full of smoke. I think I've never smoked in my life, but I probably smoked like a packet a day, like each time I was there. But yeah, that was like when I started playing like house music and more sort of techno and house, tech house. And but sometime before then, I think we did our like progress party, which was
Yeah.
it's 9, and we'd advertised it a bit here and there, but we didn't really know that many people that were going to be coming. But it was like almost packed out, if I remember correctly. I remember being shocked, or like you're on the door to start with, helping out with like the tickets, and then you were like, "Man, there's just like heaps of people coming here." And then you played, and I was like, "What the hell?" There's just more and more, and they just keep coming. Like it was totally the word of mouth after a while. I think like it was amazing. But yeah, like and then at some point, I had to go back to Hawke's Bay because I think, it was at one point I started working at Weta Digital as a visual effects artist as well as DJing, which was crazy because the hours were just insane in visual effects. But I made it work and had to go back to Hawke's Bay, which is where I'm originally from, and started to learn production, like music production. I was like, well, if I only want to like do this beyond just like playing as a resident in clubs and being booked and things, I should start making music. And I'd always been fascinated in how like the process of remixing and getting into production. And just had this free time between contracts at Weta to like just go full on with it. And I came back in around 2014, I think, back to Wellington, started again at Weta, and got involved with a gig with Carl Cox, which was
Oh, that's right.
pretty.
Yeah.
I'd met him actually the year prior in 2013, and he was one of the ones that pushed me into production. Like he was like, "Are you producing? Are you making any music or anything like that?" And at the time, I wasn't, and I was like, "I'd like to get into it, but my hours just don't really allow for it at the moment." And so fast forward a year, and he comes into the club to do sound check, and one of the first things he asked me is like, "Have you been making any music?" And I was like, "What? Actually, I have." And gave him a couple of tracks on a USB, and he played them during sound check, and we managed to capture one on video. And he was just super impressed with what I'd done in like a year. And I can't quite remember if he played one that night because I got quite drunk after a while and was going a bit too hard on the strobe light next to him and everything, and just kind of been in awe of the fact that I was like within a meter of this guy that I consider like a major legend. Like he's probably my inspiration for a lot when it comes to like just how to treat people in the scene and being like really well respected and things. I eventually moved from Weta to Serato in Auckland, which meant that I had to basically start again DJing because there was kind of a big divide. I don't know if it's still the case, but between Wellington and Auckland, like if you're a Wellington DJ and you tried to make it in Auckland, it was like you basically had to start from square one. No one was going to give you like a free ride into a new residency or into their parties. There's a few exceptions, but most of the time, like they've been friends back in Wellington or something like that before. But a couple of DJ friends who worked at Serato, they got me involved there. So that was Jamie White and Matt Drake. And so not too long after I moved, Hape moved up as well to be with his girlfriend. And after maybe a year or so of not really getting booked and being kind of frustrated by it, we started our own party at Red Bar called Pitch and Faders, which was a play on the fact that we were like invading the pitch of other people, pitch invaders, but it was pitch and faders. And that kind of, after maybe 6 months, we managed to move it to one of the sort of prestigious clubs in Auckland called Ink Bar, and had some incredible parties there. And then I got involved a little bit with the one-to-one guys through meeting them originally at Taniwha's Den,
Oh, yeah.
and then they did a party with me in Auckland, and then just before I think before I moved to Sweden, I was in contact with them again, and we tried to arrange a party before I left, but managed to do one at their original club, which is now closed. They've moved to a new place now. Playing with in there was just amazing as well. Got some video on my Facebook page of that. One of my favorite gigs in Wellington, actually, aside from our like progress one, which was probably my second favorite. Um, and eventually I was just kind of frustrated also with Auckland. Like I I wanted to move to Europe. I managed to go to space in Ibiza in 2016. Some friends were getting married, and it was just like perfect timing. It was like the closing party for Carl Cox's Revolution, the closing of space itself after 27 years. And I just caught the bug essentially after that. I went to Berlin, kind of like Berlin. It was a little bit too grimy and not like flash. Like I don't like super flashy clubs, but I like them to have at least a bit of stuff that looks visually interesting. As I found kind of Berlin was just it was mostly about music, which is good, but a little bit boring. Maybe I wasn't drinking enough. But, I didn't get into Berghain either, so it probably added to it. But yeah, so wanting to move over, and I was like, oh, I just want to get over before I'm 28. And just happened to be working on a project at Serato, which involves Spotify. And then Spotify kind of headhunted me, and I had this opportunity to move to Europe. So fast forward 2017, I made my way over, and yeah, so since I've been in Europe, I've managed to play in I think 5 different countries. I played in Ibiza, played for El Ro in Antwerp in Belgium. I did a crazy gig, super loud, like insanely loud gig in Latvia. A few gigs in the UK, and yeah, just and also I played on like the Austrian Alps within like I had like 2 days notice. Hey, we're gonna do this gig in the Austrian Alps. Do you want to come? Sure. And never been to Austria. Crazy amount of trains that I had to get on to get there, and just about didn't make it. But yeah, that was with this Ibiza Club News academy that I joined, and there was many gigs that came out of that, like just through meeting other people that were involved. Yeah, and since then I've released on Unity Records and a few other different labels, and um, haven't released a heap during the pandemic, mostly because I had a child. Which listening to baby music all day, it's difficult to get inspiration, and just not having the time, and also just not having inspiration with COVID. Like COVID was for many people, I think, helped them because they had the time to really just focus, and they've come out of it really well. But for me, it's like I didn't have the inspiration, and now that clubs are open again, I'm starting to get the inspiration again, and get music made. So that's kind of how it's been for me.
Yeah, man. That's that's a really good overview of just everything that you've been through, which I really appreciate you explaining. But man, let's take it way back to the start of that. I mean, you know, back when we used to run those progress parties, there was a fair few clubs in Wellington. I mean, even Studio 9, that one that we ran there, that was an awesome club that was open at that point. And I think it really just shows how different the landscape has become for artists like us, and for the crowd who actually want to party. Because these days, you'd never get within 2 meters, 3 meters of an inside area if you were smoking.
Yeah,
Even if you were vaping, for example, like some buildings are basically just, some businesses don't allow it at all. And obviously, the amount of clubs in Wellington's particularly, I don't know about Auckland. I think there's probably a fair few left, and I know that there's a couple that have popped up in recent years. But in Wellington, particularly, I mean, we have one club now, and that's Club 121.
yeah,
Their new
yeah,
venue on Cambridge Terrace. But I think what happened, you mentioned Vespa, and I went in there a fair few times, and I think the laws back then were just a little bit more loose. They were more like the rest of the world. In other words, they were more like Europe. They were more like Germany, the UK, etc. Even Australia has looser laws than New Zealand. And I think that clubbing itself, even just electronic music, the industry kind of shut down a little bit for a while there because of the 4 a.m. closing time that people
yeah.
had to abide by.
I I even wrote a submission regarding the 4 a.m. because it was going to be 3 a.m. or even possible 2 a.m. at the time, and it was just going to be disaster, even more of a disaster. Because the thing, even with 4 a.m., like people are essentially all on the street at the same time. And what was happening at the 6 a.m. is you'd have the dregs, or like I don't want to say dregs, but maybe not the dregs, but like people that have been they've had a good night, and I was one of them. And although I was normally playing till the end, but sometimes not. But you know, everybody kind of could leave when they wanted. Whereas when you throw everybody out on the street at 4, and even if it was 2, like I think in King's Cross in Sydney for a while there was like a corrupt bit of corruption going on in like the premiership there, which hasn't really changed, but we won't go into politics. They basically enacted this like one-way door from like 1 a.m. or something like that
Mhm.
for a few years there. And it was all to try and get people to go to the Crown Casino, which was like essentially 24/7. And it was just causing absolute mayhem because now everybody's like on the street at the same time. Everybody's trying to get the same taxi. Some guy hits on some other guy's girlfriend or vice versa or whatever. And you get fights and upon fights. And I think it's actually just more dangerous. It's one, it's not as fun because especially not for like DJs, because now we've got limited hours, even less than we had previously. And you can't be as experimental because that those last 2 hours, the last 3 hours of a night, like from 3 to 6, you could kind of go anywhere with it because people are already kind of maybe too drunk. The club's kind of just staying open to get a few drinks here and there. It's not like their peak time, and it was good to be able to just kind of experiment with it. And yeah, it's just 4 a.m. is better than nothing, I guess, but it's a bit of a shame. In Sweden, we've actually got like a 3 a.m. close here.
Oh, true.
Yeah, which is not. Sweden's kind of I don't know. I didn't pick like the best place for for dance music, I guess. There is a good-ish scene here. There's a couple of clubs um, that are pretty decent for techno and house and stuff. And I've met many artists through them, like through knowing the promoters and playing at them a few times. And yeah, but we have like a 3 a.m. close here, and I think you can get like a special license where you have to sign up people on like a private party. So people will sign up and they can't sell like certain alcohol or whatever, and that will be till 5 a.m. Or you get the illegal parties that happen in the forest quite a bit here, but it's nothing like Berlin or like Amsterdam and these kind of hot spots for clubbing. Barcelona, I guess Ibiza is another one, but yeah, Sweden's like produces some incredible producers. But most of them have to like leave. One, because the taxes are so crazy, and also the scene is like not big enough for them. So the likes of like Adam Bayer and Tiger Stripes, and then you've got like the commercial side with like Axwell and Grosso and all those guys. They've all come out of the Swedish system, but yeah, it's a good environment, but it's not the best for clubbing.
Yeah, and obviously, I know we've touched on this before, but in my day job now, this is exactly what we advocate against. We try and speak for the hospitality industry, and you mentioned that you'd done a submission in the past, and this is basically what I do. I submit on policies that are actually going against the hospitality industry in a sense. So, that you mentioned that they were trying to bring it back to 3 a.m. I mean, they're still trying to do that, believe it or not. We've got multiple pieces of evidence from all around the world that suggest that earlier closing times don't result in less alcohol harm, because that's what they're trying to
Yeah,
reduce at the end of the day.
people. I'm pretty sure people are going to just nick it more. Like, they need to get it in before it closes.
Right,
Like
100%. I mean,
I think it was actually going to be 2 a.m. I think at one point, but yeah, 3 a.m. is still good. It's just ridiculous. Like some people even said, "Oh, why doesn't it just close at 12?" Like what?
yeah, well, I mean, you're going to get those people everywhere, admittedly. But what we've got to realize is that we as a country, New Zealand, before COVID, our number one export was tourism. And if people are coming from all around the world, and they're coming here to possibly have some parties and stuff like that, and they see that New Zealand closes at 2 a.m., they're never going to come back here. They're going to be like, "Oh, what a joke of a country."
It's also shocking for like you basically can't have international DJs at that point because they go on at 1 till 3, and there's like another DJ at the end maybe for the last hour or something like that. But used to be able to do 2 internationals in a night back in the day, like Sandwiches, which was kind of the 1-to-1 before 1-to-1 came about. Those guys, like they based that off Fabric in London
Yeah.
as much as they could in the same sound system, the mouth and audio and things. And I've had many a chat with Bryce and Stu and all that from them from that crew. And yeah, like they ended up closing it, I think around 2013, 2012. It was like the Earth strengthening thing basically put the nail in the coffin there. But yeah, until the one-to-one guys came along, there wasn't really much of a scene left in Wellington. Like they they even were at the time like just doing house parties and like parties like kind of illegal stuff. Because they just couldn't stand like the club. It really surprised me that those guys actually opened a club.
Well, that's the problem, bro. Like that is the problem, right? It's like I still speak to Bryce these days because he's a member of our organization for my day job, and we still talk about sandwiches quite a lot and how obviously that 4 a.m. license closed them down. But the problem is that look at the UK, for example, or Germany or wherever, or Australia, even Sydney. They've got a plethora of places for people to go to. And these places have a responsibility under the law to actually provide a safe environment for people, right? If you don't have those places, where are they going to go? They're going to go to houses, they're going to go to illegal forest parties, that type of stuff. And it's going to force the off license environment alcohol from supermarkets to be consumed even more in a pretty unsafe environment.
Yeah, even if you go beyond alcohol and into the the drug scene that sometimes follows the dance music scene, that's now in an area that you could be in a forest and wander off, and who knows, you're exposed to the other. It's a big deal. Like, yeah, and if you're in a club and you get, something goes wrong, even if it's not from drinking, but it might be from some other thing. At least you're in an environment where they can call, ambulance and get you sorted as quickly as possible, and have a first aid kit, or they've got some sort of training that goes along with like dealing with people that are having trouble. So I fully agree. Like, um, clubs are far more safe than house parties.
Couldn't agree more, bro. I mean, I'm actually quite surprised to hear from you that the scene, sorry, the closing time in Sweden is 3 a.m. I did not expect that, considering that most places in Europe are later than that. So, do you have to travel quite a bit for gigs?
Yeah. So if I at one point I was actually playing outside Sweden more than I was playing inside Sweden, because obviously when I came here, I had to really start again from scratch. And I actually, in the time, had joined. So when I first moved here, um, I think within 3 months, I went to Enrico Sanguiliano, I think that's how you pronounce his name, gig in this place called Slaktuset, which is basically slaughterhouse in Swedish. It's in the slaughterhouse district where they used to do a lot of slaughtering, but now it's mostly clubs and like venues and things. But I met a guy called Andreas Strand. We just chatting with Enrico after the gig, and a friend of mine, Ben English, who's what his DJ name is. He's from the UK. He kind of invited me along to that gig originally, got me door pass and whatnot, and uh, introduced me to the promoters and stuff, the 420 group. And yeah, so we were living in a similar area, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't share a cab," and we're heading back, and he's like, "Oh, really wanted to get into DJing, but I haven't really got any gear, or like haven't really had the time to actually get into it." And I was like, "Oh, at that time, I think I'd been DJing like 15 years and stuff." And I was like, well, I've been playing a while, so if you want, you can come over and like jam on my equipment, or um, yeah." And we hadn't really we didn't get in touch again for maybe 2 months or something like that, and he had just managed to win like a XTJ RX2, and yeah, and that was pretty crazy. But he invited me over to his house, and we were just like jamming on that, and um, we went to the Slaktuset that night, and he was talking to the guys in Swedish, the 420 group, and he was kind of pointing at me and stuff, and I was like, what was going on there? Because I didn't understand any Swedish, and he's like, oh, they were asking me if I have DJ'd much before, and that because he always used to be involved with them and just knew them quite well. And he's like, oh, I haven't really, but this guy here has, and if I could play with him like back to back, um, I would be happy to play. And so like within 6 months or something of being in Sweden, I managed to get in with this group, and through Andreas, and we formed Matt Empyre, and have released some music as well. It's more of the melodic techno kind of sound. And yeah, we've done some gigs with those guys, but they have so many DJs here that are trying to get in that it's like, maybe get booked once or twice a year if you're lucky. And so for a long time, I was actually getting booked outside of Sweden far more than in Sweden, mostly through the Ibiza Club News group, which was a good thing to join. And yeah, so the it's a combination of the hours being less here and just the amount of DJs. But yeah.
So, as much as I'd love to chat about the history of clubs, clubbing in Wellington, etc., I do want to talk about your own productions because obviously, when when I was here with you, you played more housey stuff, and obviously you've made the switch to more techno-y type stuff these days, and I know that's kind of what you produce. So, how did you make the switch to techno? When was that? And I guess, have you ever produced any other music apart from techno?
So yes, so it was around about, I think it was around the Terrace days. So it would have been 2010-ish into 2011. Before that, we were playing a lot of like electro house and the fidget and all that kind of stuff at Maya. And I remember you were more into like the minimal techno H2 and like the motion. Is it Motion? The UK? What's the club?
Emotion or
Oh,
mission?
Mission. Yeah, Mission 2.
Yes, it's not there anymore. It's that closed down.
Um, so yeah, like I remember you being more into that, and then that was kind of what got me into like Umek and Loco and
Oh yeah.
Dice. Not Loco Dice, Loco and Jam, and a bunch of other guys that were kind of more in that minimal like 1605. What their label sounded like at that time. Um, and yeah, like when I got to Terrace and I was a bit more free, like Harpe was always like taking the piss out of me when he would come into Mayor and be like, "Why are you playing like crappy electro or whatever?" And he was more into like his progressive house and prog and techno as well. And so it was just kind of evolved from there. And like I think also Mr. Oz, like they've always kind of been more techno as well. He used to be a trance guy back in the UK, but since he moved to Wellington, it was like kind of a tech housey house slash techno that he was playing at Vespa, changed throughout the night. But yeah, so that's what got me into it. And then I have produced some like kind of garagey house and and house music under an alias M&E, which is just Matt and E. Um, that was around I think 2015. And then one of the songs, Education, which has got like Carroll, I just managed to watch a live stream of his and was recording at the time, and he sort of talked about like how um, you know you've got to educate the crowd, and the fact that people might be into one style now doesn't mean they'll be into that. They will be always into that style, and they might be into your style later. So just be ready for when they come. And so I took that little rant he had and it worked perfectly with this track I was working on. And yeah, that became Education. And then Serato actually used that for like almost 2 years as part of their promotional material. So I got paid every time they used that. But I every time I got into like a thing where I was trying to make tech house, and then when I'd make tech house after maybe an hour, it become techno. Like I took all the groove and it just like got way more bassy, and those sounds just always kind of resonated with me more. I tried to make a house track, and then all of a sudden all the groove's gone, and then it's getting into tech house, and then it's techno, and so that's like it seems to happen to me all the time. Um, I like to put some sort of trancey elements in my music as well. So one of our Iconic Empire tracks that I made was I just wanted to like remake one of my favorite trance tracks called Carte Blanche by I don't know how you pronounce the actual name. It's Free Corsten under an alias like Veronica or something like that. Carte Blanche, and it's I've made it into like a techno version, um, way heavier. Still got the main synth and stuff, but it was like a challenge for me just to like recreate the song um, with the MIDI and recreate the synths and things. But yeah, so for me, it's just it's also music that I like to mix more. I found like with electro, you could be really creative in ways that you could kind of cut things and jump across tracks really quickly. And that's kind of what the EDM thing ended up becoming. But I jumped off that train. So the tech house was cool, like the nice grooves, but he couldn't layer it enough. Like I got more. as I got more and more fascinated by different DJ gear, I was like, okay, I want to use 3 decks now, and now I want to use 4 decks. Now I want to add a sampler to it, like all these things. Like I haven't got enough hands for half of it, but um, I found with techno and like especially that minimal stuff, like we were able to layer so much more into it and create our own kind of tracks out of it. And like I've always loved trance, but you have to mix the end into the outro, like the outro into the intro of the next, because otherwise, if you try and mix them, unless you get it, perfectly in key and the right melodies that kind of don't clash, you have to basically just wait from one end to the other, and I don't like waiting. So um, I find with techno I can like jump around, use all the features like beat jump and jump between different parts of the track and loop this bit, and a bit like Richie Horden does, where he just takes little chunks and like builds tracks out of them. And I think also I just became like really into what Carl Cox was doing, and my style is always kind of his the music he plays is kind of what I've always been into the last maybe 5 or 6 years. Um, and yeah, just it's it's just what I make. I guess like I've tried other stuff. Like I know you make kind of is it minimal as well? They call it or whatever.
Yeah,
That confused me. The minimal, like when I heard minimal, and it was like in the 1-to-1 guys are like, "Oh, I'm playing minimal." I was like, "Minimal techno, is that back again?" And so
it's weird.
I heard it, and I was like, "This is not what I thought it
No
was."
one found it more weird than me, man. Honestly, when people started calling, because the type of minimal these days that I guess I'm producing, I used to call deep house. And
Yeah,
it used to be very sort of deep house, but these days it's minimal, and it's like, hang on a second, it's not minimal at all, though, is it?
yeah. Like I've heard of the micro house with like the DJ Seinfeld and all that. Like, um, it's sort of another tangent, but like when I was at Spotify, I like started like a DJ club there, which was a way to teach other people how to DJ, and then got involved with like teaching people to play, and then we would run these events every couple of Fridays a month, and with the people experience team there, and they have this insane sound system, like a line array on like a line array sound system, huge subs, like 4 subs, and this tiny, not tiny, but like for the size of the place, this sound system is absolutely insane, like bigger than any clubs that I've ever come across. Or maybe not, because like Space had a incredible sound system, but like if you took the space sound system and shove that in like a smallish floor. Um, yeah, but anyway, so from doing that, I ended up playing with Fatboy Slim. So he came along and just said, "Oh, I want to play like before, like at the end of a workday one day." Like he was going to be playing in Gothenburg or something like that, but he flew into Stockholm and then had like 5 hours between flights, and so just came played on the Spotify uh, 11th floor and in the middle of the dance floor and everything. We set it up like a 360 booth, similar to his like live show that he does in the arenas and everything. And playing after him was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. The amount of energy that comes out of Fatboy Slim even at 5 p.m. on a Friday, and then you've got to somehow cover like take all his equipment out and keep the song playing, and like, yeah, man, it was a mission. But some amazing parties that happened at Spotify.
Just going back to what you said, because there's so much that I can just pick apart by what you just said about DJing different types of music and how you actually have to DJ in a completely different way. Um, One thing that I don't think I learned until quite late is the fact that you have to do that. Like, I remember back when you and me used to play, mate, even then you wanted to use a third deck and have an a cappella, and get creative in that kind of way. I think what I've come to realize is that after trying to DJ multiple different types of music, I'm never going to be the most creative DJ that I can be. I know that some people are naturally kind of gifted with that jumping around 4 decks type thing, and you are definitely one of those people. Well, you've practiced for years and years and years. Let's be honest. But I think for me personally, I think there's another side of DJing that I've talked about quite a bit on this podcast. That the kind of music that I make and DJ now, I think lends more to track selection than creative DJing, and I think that it's one of the areas that I really want to focus on at the moment, or have been focusing on for quite a while. Don't get me wrong, I'd still love to be able to jump around four decks, but I find that quite stressful playing live. I do, because there's an element of I could fuck this up so easily right now,
Yeah.
and it's not going
Which
to look
which
very
one of
good.
these tracks which one of these tracks is out of time? And if I
Yeah,
move
yeah,
that one, there's 3 more out. So like, oh no. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mate, all
That's
due respect to you for doing that, because I know how hard that is, and I'm sure anyone listening to this podcast probably does, even if they're not a DJ. It looks complicated.
yeah.
It's probably very hard live.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I'm always going to focus on the track selection part, partially just because if you can perform live and have every single track on point in the right place and mixed at the right time, you don't have to get too creative with your mixing. There's just so many sides of DJing itself that you can focus on, and I don't think I've had anyone on the podcast yet that gets so creative live as you do. So it's quite nice to hear that. So just going back to your productions then. So because I've heard a few of your productions, and they're really good, really good. Even though I'm not a massive techno fan myself, I can definitely see that there's a lot of effort gone into your production. Um, if there was one thing that you could recommend to the newer producer, something that you've learned over the years of producing, what would it be?
For me, and this screwed me up for quite some time. Don't always have sorry, not as in don't. Always have like a utility on your master that you can mono, because you can make an incredible song that works amazingly in stereo, but 99% of clubs are almost wired for mono, or at least there's speakers in the clubs that are going to be mono. Like they might just be over the bar, they might, and if you get like phase cancellation, especially in the subs, you lose like all the energy essentially, and like things just won't translate properly. So what I do, I use Ableton. I add a utility that's part of my template, and it's got the mono button now. I think it used to have, I think it did have a mono button, but now it's like an actual like bass mono and a few other things. But just use the mono. You can create a keyboard shortcut. I just set it to M, and I just like M on and off every time I'm like adding a new element. You could have a wide synth or something like that, and like, okay, what's that going to sound like as a mono synth? And if it gets phase cancelled, I'll maybe just flip the phase or stuff like that. So for me, it's like mono phase cancellation. Like understanding that will save you a shitload of time, and especially as most people will find it when they're in the mastering phase as well, and that's not the greatest time to find it. For a master engineer to be like, hey, this is having problems, can you like fix it? Sometimes they can fix it, but sometimes it's needs to be redone. So
It's a really valuable lesson to learn, I guess, because I don't think a lot of people know that, like you say, most club systems do convert it to mono anyway. And whilst you want it to sound good for a release and people to stream it on Spotify and have all these stereo images and panning and stuff like that, I think that's really valuable. But you've got to,
panning's fine. Panning's fine, but it's just like these super wide. Like when people say use the Haas effect to make your hi hats like spread, or your snares and stuff, that means you're going to like lose, because that's basically phase cancellation that causes that effect. You'll notice like it can be okay on some high elements if you can have like maybe a few other hi hats that make up that range. But if you only have like one hi hat and you're doing that to it, you're going to be killing it, and it will sound good in stereo. But the thing is, if you can make a mix sound amazing in mono, it's going to sound incredible in stereo.
oh, 100%, yeah. That that has affects an interesting thing. I actually don't do that. I actually use, because I tend to layer my hats quite a lot, because obviously the minimal type music, I tend to, when I want to up the energy, I'll just add another layer of hats. So I'll add an open hat or a different type of hat, or I'll add a wide hat. And sometimes I use this plugin called Ultra Pitch by Waves, I think it is. And you can add some stereo imaging to the left and right and a slight echo, so it does kind of do that pan. So I don't actually, I think that's a version of the Haas effect, but I tend that.
Yeah, well,
Go on.
You can do it where you can split. Do you split like parallel compression or like not parallel compression, parallel processing, where you can split it left and right, and then you could add a bit of crunch or like overdrive to one side and not on the other, and that will already kind of create like a difference in your ears, which will give you that effect. So instead of having to just use like tight delay, you can figure out different ways of like affecting one side over the other, or just take two different hats that are similar-ish and then pan one left, pan one right, and then you get the same thing. When you're trying to like save channels, or I think that's kind of where the Haas effect originated, was like a limited amount of resources, and so you'd have like, okay, I have hats, I want to spread them and not have to go down two more channels or something like that, you know.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Do you think, just going back to something you said earlier on, just really quickly, because you said something about you tried to recreate one of your favorite tracks. Do you think it's valuable for new producers to start not making their own music, but actually trying to recreate other people's music to find out how it works?
I think so, yeah. I didn't do that. I like that trance Carte Blanche track was one of the first that I really tried to like knuckle down and just try it. I think I saw a video on someone saying, "Oh, this is a good way to like, as you said, learn the processes of how something is built." You see quite a there's a really good channel on for techno on YouTube called All You Need Is Live, where the guy just uses Ableton Live and he makes techno, but I think he's actually a ghost producer for a bunch of techno
Oh, true.
DJs maybe. He's able to like recreate stuff super accurately, and he doesn't seem to release anything, but yeah, he makes a living off of YouTube, I guess, and probably ghosts on the side, but that's a whole different topic. But he talked about that, like how to recreate, and like it's a really good way just to understand, like, okay, so this is like one thing is theory, maybe. You'll learn from it by just analyzing the MIDI if you can get hold of the MIDI. Like I didn't create the MIDI for Carte Blanche. That's like an insane, like almost orchestral style like MIDI. But I threw it into a synth and I just started tweaking the synth until it got where I needed it to be. And then I took it from that point where I like had it just as a trance track and then technofied it so I could play it out. It it was actually for Elro, that one. I created that one for Elro.
Mate, I can't believe you played Elro. That's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it was nuts. Like it wasn't the big stages or anything, but it was like part of Ibiza Club News, and you know he had like 80 people that are in that course, and he only got around about maybe 20 of us to do it. So it was like really really nice to do. I didn't get to play in high Ibiza, which a few of them did. So he kind of I think spread us around a bit. I played in like the bathroom, which I always found like one of the weirdest places for a DJ spot is like in the bathroom in Ibiza, but in high Ibiza, old space place. But yeah, so that was just insane. Like just being backstage and like I think I met Joseph Capriati
Oh, really?
briefly there, and who else? There's just a bunch around. I'm not like I don't really go around trying to just like get photos or anything with DJs. If they just happen to be there at the bar or something, I'll just have a chat.
Yeah.
Um, and like that's in I've met quite a few through the 420 group, and it just um, yeah, like in Rinko, I saw him at first time, and then like when I was at Junction Two, managed to sneak backstage with a few people that actually had backstage passes, and met Carl Cox again, and first time meeting Matt Empyre, and Rinko was absolutely wasted after his set. He was like super high on life and high on probably maybe something else, I'm not sure. And, and he just like sprinted. He saw me, and I'd only met him once before, like maybe the year before or something, and just sprinted at me and like leaped into my arms, like bride or something like that. And I nearly dropped him on his wrist and shit. I was like, oh my god, like that's gonna put him out of action for a while. And yeah, like just I think because we were just chatting so casually, I wasn't like trying to fanboy or anything like that when I met him. And many DJs like Anna and who else? Renia Zonneveld, a few others like that, and just being casual, I guess, just being a Kiwi.
But the thing is, you can make. I mean, we've probably both witnessed this. You can make lifelong friendships just through music. I mean, this whole music thing. You can take it as far as you want. But in the music scene, especially the electronic music scene, you can meet these people who you can have such an interesting, different connection with than someone that you'd meet just out on the street or whatever. It's pretty beautiful, man, and it's clearly taking you to many places in the world. Do you think you'll ever move back to New Zealand?
I'm not 100% sure because I own an apartment here and stuff and the money's pretty good here. I was finding like more maybe if the housing market sort of cools down a bit in New Zealand, which it seems like it is, it's a possibility. But like I was kind of struggling to live in Auckland as it was just on my own, and now that I have like a wife and a child, and obviously would have two incomes, but it's still like I would struggle to buy in Auckland, maybe possibly in Wellington, but then it's still pretty high there. And then like the places I could afford, like there's not really a club scene and like no real place for me to work in my profession. So I'm kind of feel like I'm a little bit trapped outside of New Zealand, but maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But I like to return. I'd like to play again when I come back. Like the last time I went back, I did in Auckland, north of Auckland. Be cool to play. Logan Baker got me involved with that. His shipwrecked party. It was like a takeover for that stage, and he got me to play at like his silent studios, which was really cool. And
That's a cool venue, man.
yeah,
I've been speaking to Logan recently. He's coming on the podcast at some point, but
oh cool.
he's currently getting ready for Shipwrecked.
Yeah, yeah, he's going
It
full
was
on.
I was a bit gutted actually to find out that he's using, because obviously last year it was cancelled. He's using last year's lineup that didn't get a chance to play. So
Okay.
I was like trying to give him a nudge. I was like, oh come on, mate, maybe 2024.
Yeah, yeah. Even like because when I was in Auckland, like I never got booked by him, but like the moment I was outside of came back, it's like I was maybe because I'd played some other places around the world, like I was a bit more like in demand, but not really in demand. I don't know. But playing like I'd tried I think to get into there when I was in Auckland at one point, and then also a shipwreck party and stuff, and like you can book. I think we booked him at one point for Pitch and Phase, I'm pretty sure. But basically, once you start booking DJs or you get them involved and stuff, they'll like kind of pay you back, I guess. So that was his way of doing it, I imagine. But yeah, like I would love to. I'd love to come back. I need to see my mum again and stuff, and yeah, it'll,
Is she in the Hawke's Bay?
she's in Hawke's Bay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Hawke's Bay had a cool festival last year, or this year, should I say? It was called Nest Fest,
Oh yeah.
and
Okay.
it's one of the guys who I just recently did a mix for. Actually, he's called Henry George. He owns a brand called Neptuno.
Oh, okay.
I think Jesper, who is involved with that as well. I think he's a resident for them, and
Oh, nice.
he had a stage there, which I thought was pretty cool, and it apparently went off. He had some good artists on there. One of the guys that I respect quite a lot at the moment, DJ Selknam. It's called Sebastian. He's from Chile. He's based in Auckland, and he's a really good producer. He owns a record label. He played there as well, and he plays that real raw minimal type micro house, and
Hmm.
I'm surprised that went off so
Yeah.
much in Hawke's Bay, but it did. So
Yeah.
clearly the scene's growing, man.
Yeah. It sounds good. Like I have like envy when I see like R&B and all these like festivals, especially when we're all locked down and like they're all able to do it because the lockdowns had kind of worked for a while there until Dimension came along and screwed that up for everybody. But yeah, like for the most part, it was cool just to watch it from. And I was glad they like live streamed it and stuff. But yeah, I feel like I still want to do a lot of. There's so many places to play, and um, I think eventually I might come back to New Zealand. We're still not really sure, but yeah,
Yeah, I at some point, obviously we'll keep in touch, but at some point I'd like to get you to play a high frequency party.
I'd love
Um,
to.
e- I mean, we're only starting this party out with this brand at the moment, but yeah, it's going to grow eventually, and I've got some pretty big aspirations for it. But we'll see where it takes us. What you need to do, Matt, is you need to move back to Wellington and open a club with me.
Exactly. I think that's what I'll end up doing. Like, make some good money over here, and then like throttle into the club, do what I want to
Yeah,
do. Ultimately, so it's always been my ultimate dream. I think. Like, if I was stuck somewhere like that, try and open a club. It's like dedicated to good music, and yeah.
I, I, I still think that I will do it at some stage because I've been working in hospital for so long now on the other side of the fence, supporting businesses, that I think the experience that I've got would just be a lot easier to run a business in that industry. So, but I wouldn't want to do it alone. I think that's the problem. So I need someone with as much experience as you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. All right, man. So I guess two more really quick questions before we wrap it up because we're coming up on time here. But yeah. So what's next in your personal life and DJ career over on the other side of the world?
So in my personal life, I moved away from Spotify to EA Dice, and I work in the Frostbite engine. So we build the engine that powers a lot of EA games like the Battlefield series and the FIFA and like most of the big money earners for the company. So I'm continuing with them, trying to get more into the creative side of it. Like I got burnt out quite a bit with The Hobbit and stuff when I was at Weta, and that's why I'm reason for moving to Serato. But I kind of have this itch to get back into it. Music wise, still working on some productions. As I said, like COVID really screwed me up a lot for like inspiration, and listening to like 1, 2, 3 songs and stuff on YouTube every day doesn't really help either. That's the kids' music. But I'm getting there. Like my production partner, Andreas, is part of Iconic Empire. He's like just a wizard when it comes to like coming up with ideas and things. So we'll eventually have more music out there. I'm working on some Matt Empyre stuff as well, but it's still pretty early. Trying to get some gigs, probably in the UK, through my friend Ben, who runs the rhythm parties there. He's doing like one of those kind of orchestral dance things in the park there in September. I wish I could go, but sadly can't. But so if you're listening in the UK around the Wolverhampton area, that's I think it's like Poms in the Park or something like that. Worth checking out. But yeah, and also his rhythm parties are really good. But he's wanted to get me over quite a few times, but then COVID hit and just trying to have a family and not being able to be away too much, you know. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the plan. I want to jump back into music properly full on, and a little bit late to the party again, but it didn't stop me before, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you fancy producing a little bit of different music, maybe we should do a collab at some point and see if
I
we can
think
get that released at
I
some
think we should
point.
try and just make sure if it ever heads too much towards techno that you just pull it back a bit again.
Mate, honestly, when I started producing, I wanted to produce really deep house, and then obviously it started to go towards this like more happier, minimal, I don't know, tech housey type stuff, and it just naturally just goes that way all the time. So I know how you feel about.
We'll just push and pull from each other until we'll end
Yeah,
up probably big house or something like that.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, that sounds good. So last thing, Matt. So obviously you've done a mix for us today. What can we expect from the mix? Does it contain any of your own productions?
Yeah, it does. So it'll start with one of my favorite tracks, which is the one that Carl Cox said had like Coxie written all over it, which is a song called "Wonderful." It's I released it on a friend of his, Horatio's label, Shodan Records. It'll contain also, I think I've put Carte Blanche in there, so you'll hear that one. I also recently released a track called "I'll Be There," which has a drum complex remix. It's actually a sample of Michael Jackson's "I'll Be There," but it just kind of repeats itself. It's like a hypnotic kind of way that you wouldn't really know it's that, and I hope they don't find out because then I'll get sued. But it's got a little snippet of like the main like kind of hook of that song as well. But yeah, so that'll be in there, and then mostly just techno. I'll probably like I've taken it like in a few different directions. I always like a little bit of nostalgia. Um, yeah, that's what you'll be expecting, what you'll be hearing.
Cool, cool. Do you do any tutoring for the techno heads out here in New Zealand?
I've
No
not
time for
really.
that.
Yeah, no, no time. I got an email today actually asking like if I want to be part of this Ibiza Club News again, like for production tutoring or like doing tutorials. But I feel like I just make stuff and it just happens. Like I couldn't say, oh, we're going to recreate this, like, but maybe that's enough. Like just say, hey, this is how I make a track. Follow along, maybe.
Yeah, cool. Well, Matt, I could literally chat to you for like 4 more hours, but yeah, we'll probably go over time on the podcast easily. So so thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. If anyone wants to check out any of Matt's stuff, I'll put all the links to his social media and his music in the description of this podcast, and we'll get it shared on Instagram and stuff like that. So thanks for coming on, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great to chat with you.
And I hope you all enjoy Matt's mix.